Hello everyone, and welcome to my 10.1.5 Arcane Mage guide. You want to become the master of Arcane?
Grant your humble servant the most powerful attack ever known! Grant your humble servant the ultimate attack spell! Explosion!
Well, then I'm probably not the right person to teach you, but anyways, let's give it a go, huh? Let's start talking about the stat weights of Arcane. Arcane doesn't really have a specific, template of what they want to go for. You kind of want a mix of everything. However, mastery is technically better to have a bit more of. Currently for me, I'm lacking a lot of versatility, so my gems are mastery verse. Mastery is extremely important to understand as Arcane because each of your Arcane charges increases your damage, and also it's kind of how we can manage our mana without having to stop casting spells throughout the entirety of the fight. The way Arcane charges works is that, for instance, in Arcane Blast, each charge increases the damage and mana cost and reduces the cast time. So that's how you kind of build up and burn your mana, which is not really as important anymore because now we're basically focusing on our cooldowns like Touch of the Magi, Radiant Spark, Arcane Surge, Evocation, and Mana Gem. Well, technically Mana Gem is used to regen mana and gaining a 5% additional damage for 12 seconds. Now let's talk about talents. In your class tree, you don't really have a lot of power points, so to speak. You have a little bit of Incanter's Flow, you have Overflowing Energy, Shifting Power to reduce the cooldowns of your other cooldowns. However, you have one enormous damage increase, which is Temporal Warp. This stacks with your natural time warp, so that's 60% additional haste. This is the reason why Arcane Mage in general is quite a burst spec and quite loaded into your time warp. The other talent isn't really picked in any situation currently. However, you can think of it as if you are not using Bloodlust for the majority of the fight, then you can go into Time Anomaly and have a bit of a smoother damage curve. However, you will lose out on your overall DPS in the end, granted that you can benefit from at least the full duration of Time Warp. Defensively, from the class tree, you are quite tanky as a mage currently. Given that you have Arcane Warding, just a passive 4% damage reduction. You also have Prismatic Barrier, which is a decent absorb with an additional reducing magic damage taken. Then you have Mirror Images, which is a less potent damage reduction, but it's very nice because the mirror images you cast also cast Frostbolt, which slows your targets. You also have Alter Time, which basically snapshots your HP, and then once it either you reapply it or the 10 seconds are up, you revert back to the location you were with the amount of health you had. You also have Tempest Barrier, which means that every time you blink you get a 6% absorb shield, which is nice. Well, normally you have Ice Block, but I have replaced it by Ice Cold. Ice Block is an amazing immunity cooldown because it's basically 10 seconds of not being able to die. However, for most content currently, Ice Cold is better because even though it's not an immunity, it's still a 70% damage reduction. Only for 6 seconds though. However, you're able to move, you can cast, and it doesn't happen on the global cooldown, so you don't have to preemptively use Ice Cold. Now there is one choice note here, which kind of divides how you want to play your mage. I am mostly a Ice Flows gamer. I like being able to move short amount of distances without having to blink. You can pick Shimmer if you prefer to play with that. It's the same thing. It's basically an upgraded version of Blink, where you can use it while you're casting other spells, and you get 2 charges. That's entirely up to you which you prefer of these two. And then of course you also have Greater Invis, which is a 60% damage reduction while you're invisible, and for 3 seconds after reappearing. Going over the spec tree, there are some keynotes that you will almost always take, or well, that you always will take, which is going to be Arcane Surge. This is your main cooldown, so to speak. However, we don't really care about the damage it does. We care about the spell damage increase we get afterwards of using it. We also want to make sure that we use Siphon Storm. This is what we use in our opener and before every one of our big burns, something I will come into later. We also have Touch of the Magi, which is just 20% more damage you deal to the target. After these 12 seconds, it will explode and deal AoE damage. Quite nice. And then we have Radiant Spark. You apply this debuff, and then for each direct damage spell you cast, your target takes 10% increased damage, so that's 10, 20, 30, 40. This is a huge proponent of how we play our mage, basically making sure that we sync up our cooldowns. It's a very cooldown heavy spec. Lastly, in single target you also pick up mana gem because of the 5% spell damage. As you can see, Arcane is all about having multiple percentage increases to our base kit. Our base kit is Arcane Blast, Arcane Missiles, Nether Tempest, Barrage, and Arcane Orb, and Arcane Explosion for AoE. The rest of it is all cooldowns. How do we play Arcane Mage in single target? Well, there are 3 things you need to know. First off, I'm gonna tell you about the filler rotation. The filler rotation is your fallback rotation that you go back into in pretty much all scenarios where you don't have a specific point you want to do. In order to understand this, Clearcasting is based on the amount of mana you spend. You gain a chance to get a free, more powered up Arcane Missiles, which can be shown by this base UI. Now, whenever we use Clearcasting, we get this buff, Nether Precision, which increases our Arcane Blast damage by 20%. Your filler rotation is, if you have Nether Precision, you always want to Arcane Blast those 2 away. If you don't have those, but you have a Clearcasting, and you don't have Nether Precision, but you have Clearcasting, you Clearcasting to regain that precision. In case you don't get either, it's simply just casting Arcane Blast, and that's your base filler. And as you can see, my mana is draining ever so slowly, and that is how you basically use your filler rotation as an Arcane Mage. When we talk about our cooldowns, we have 2 different ways to do our cooldowns. We have our Big Burn, which encompasses Evocation, Arcane Surge, and Mana Gem. Mana Gem is on a 1.5 minute cooldown, so it technically lines up with your Evocation and your Arcane Surge every single time. Always make sure that you have 3 charges of Mana Gem before going into a fight. This will last you for all 1.5 minute and 3-minute markers. Then you need to recast Mana Gem during the fight to be able to get new charges. Kind of annoying, but that's how it is. In your mini burn, what you want to do is you want to go Radiant Spark into Nether Tempest, then you want to go into your Barrage, immediately followed by a Touch of the Magi while Barrage is flying in the air. Now we try to fit in as many Arcane Blasts as we can in this Touch of the Magi. This is your most important spell and basically what the whole spec revolves around. The reason why we use Barrage right before Touch of the Magi is because Touch of the Magi generates you 4 arcane charges, so you can go straight into your burn. So you build up to your 4 charges. This is where we want to be pretty much all the time. Then we go Radiant Spark, Nether Tempest, Barrage, Touch of the Magi, blast away until we get a Clearcasting proc. We got one there, cast it, we clip the last tick and get another one. As you saw there in the final seconds of Touch of the Magi, I used Presence of Mind in order to fit in an additional Arcane Blast at the end. You want to keep up Nether Tempest during Touch of the Magi. Outside of Touch of the Magi, you only use Nether Tempest if you have to save mana. Now, why would you ever want to save mana? You want to save mana outside of your cooldowns when you don't really have anything going on, you don't have any major buffs. However, when you go into your big burn, like you have Evocation ready, you have Arcane Surge ready, and you have Radiant Spark. Now, this playstyle is only usable with the current 4-piece because of the spell damage increase after Arcane Surge, depending on the amount of mana we spend in Arcane Surge. How you want to pull as an Arcane Mage, this will be without Time Warp. Important to note, because Time Warp, double Time Warp, is a huge damage increase and a large part of your damage. Pre-pull, you want to make sure you have Barrier, you want to make sure you have Arcane Intellect, and you have your Arcane Familiar, and your Mana Gems ready. You want to Evocate, then you want to go Arcane Blast into an Orb. That was perfect. Then we go Radiant Spark into a Nether Tempest, Arcane Surge, Nether Tempest, Barrage, Touch of the Magi, Gem. And then it's basically just doing our filler rotation for as much of Touch of the Magi as we can do. Afterwards, you basically just want to keep up your filler rotation. And then once the Siphon Storm has dropped off, you want to immediately go into an evocation. This makes it so that we have a lot of time to set off a new Radiant Spark, a new Nether Tempest, and Barrage Magi. And then we continue our pillar rotation, basically. And that's basically all you want to do. Now, I'm currently going to be wasting a lot of mana here because I can see I have evocation in about 10 seconds. So I just want to burn all of my mana before evocation is ready, because evocation basically refills our entire mana bar. Then what we're gonna do is go Nether Tempest, clear casting. Then I go Radiant Spark, Nether Tempest, Arcane Surge into Barrage. And now we have the entire thing just continuing onward as usual. And once again, once we lose our evocation buff, we go straight back into shifting power. That's the one. Now, in this situation, I could have gone into another mini burn, which you should. The idea is that you immediately after your evocation and your arcane surge burn and your shifting power, you should be able to go almost straight into another Touch of the Magi rotation, depending on fight timings and such. That's how you do single target as Arcane. It's all very scripted, and that's how you can really mess up. As you can see, talking about AoE. So for my AoE builds, I take out Manager or Barrage, and I take out 2 points of Arcane Missile damage because we won't be using Arcane Missiles. However, we get an additional Arcane Orb, and we get the Arcane Cleave. For the most part, AoE is pretty much the exact same as single target, except our focus shifts from Arcane Blast to Arcane Barrage. The reason for this being Arcane Barrage hits up to 5 targets with Arcane Cleave. It also has a chance to proc an additional Arcane Orb. This means that you can, in theory, go into a situation as Arcane where you never have to press Arcane Explosion. This is your filler spell rather than Arcane Blast during your AoE. For AoE, if you want to go full on hard, you want to go Evocate, you want to go Radiant Spark, Arcane Surge, and Nether Tempest. While this is going off, you just want to fire off as many barrages as you can. And see, if you don't get any more things, you have to go in and then just go Arcane Explosion into a barrage again. And that was an easy 300k. Arcane can do a lot of burst damage in AoE. However, outside of your cooldowns, your damage tends to peter out quite a bit, and that's something you need to be aware of. Once again, it would follow the same principle of when we lose our Siphon Storm buff, we want to go into Shifting Power. This also deals a bit of AoE damage. We don't really care about that. We just want to reduce the cooldowns. That's about all there is to play Arcane Mage. See you in the next one.